So last but not least, I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Teena Chopra. She is a professor of medicine at the Division of Infectious Diseases and the corporate medical director of infection prevention and epidemiology and antibiotic stewardship at Detroit Medical Center. And she will be talking about the really fascinating world of our microbiome. So I'm sure this will be really eye-opening. Go ahead, Dr. Chopra.
Thank you, Meher. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the 2023 Global Health Symposium. I can share my screen if you enable me. I can.
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah.
Here you go. You should be able to now.
So while I'm doing this, and it's a nice, segue into what Dr. Gupta was mentioning. I am actually one of her volunteers who has been working with her on plant-based diet. And, I hope that some of you would consider it as well and see the change for yourself, because I have seen it. And I'll, with this, I will tell you why, how our microbiome can be affected by what we eat. So let me begin by actually telling you a little bit about microbiome. So, the most important thing that we all need to be aware of is that, we are all born with a set of microbiome organisms, which are very highly diverse organisms that are present in our intestinal tract. And they are not just bacteria, but predominantly bacteria. They are also fungi and viruses. And there are more than 100 trillion organisms with up to 1,000 species. The more diversity we have in our gut, the better it is for us. And I'll talk about that as well. But the predominant major functions of this system, it's a whole different organ system that we have, is immunity. It acts as it gives us immunity. It acts as an epithelial barrier, and also provides colonization resistance, which means that it prevents colonization with those bad bacteria. So we are born with a lot of good bacteria and maybe some bad bacteria as well. But the good species, the diversity that we have, offers colonization resistance and prevents the bad bacteria to grow. And, throughout our lifetimes, this microbiome keeps changing, and it changes based on a lot of different factors. When we have a diverse microbiome, it's called eubiosis. But for some reason, which could be multiple different reasons, the diet that we are taking, like Dr. Gupta mentioned, if we are predominantly taking a lot of animal-based diet, and we are not really eating a lot of fruits, vegetables, and fiber in our diet, we can go to dysbiosis, like that study that she talked about. The medical students were put on a high calorie animal based diet for a long period of time. And if you measure them, there's a way that you can analyze the microbiome through stool studies. And if you do it, you will see that their microbiome changes. Also, stress can lead to dysbiosis. And the major factor that changes microbiome very rapidly is exposure to antibiotics, exposure to drugs in the form of steroids, chemotherapeutic drugs. A lot of these drugs we don't have control on, but of some of them we do have control on, like unnecessary antibiotics, for example, can alter the normal gut microbiome and lead to a state which is called as dysbiosis. And this is now more prone. So when we are in dysbiosis, we are more prone to infections. We are more prone to colonization by bad bacteria like C. diff. And I'll talk about C. diff shortly. So overall, just to sort of emphasize, these microbes, they weigh as much as 1 to 2 kgs, which is roughly the weight of your brain. So they are very, very important. They function as an extra organ in our body, and they play a huge role in your health. So for example, we have 40 trillion bacterial cells in our gut, and we have 30 trillion human cells. So we are definitely more bacteria than human. And, like I said, I mean, some examples of these good bacteria are, that first grow inside babies are bifidobacteria, which help in digesting the breast milk. They digest the healthy sugars in the breast milk. They help in digesting fibers. They produce short chain fatty acids, which are very important for gut health. And these short chain fatty acids, they prevent weight gain, diabetes, and heart disease, and risk of cancer. That's why obese patients are known to have less diverse microbiomes than non-obese patients. They also help control your immune system. They help control brain health. There is a huge gut-brain axis research around Alzheimer's, dementia, as well as gut health. So they really have a big role to play in affecting the CNS, central nervous system functions. So just to give you an idea of all the different diverse range of functions they modulate, starting with the CNS, all the way to protecting us against pathogens, producing vitamins like B12 and vitamin K in particular. They help in immune system. They also help us with fat storage and promotion of intestinal health and preventing leaky gut that you have heard of in some patients. So these are, predominantly important functions that they play in our body. This is a great example of one of the axes where gut microbiome is functions to help us. So for example, if we are exposed to a lot of stress, for example, whenever there is stress, there is stimulation of the hypothalamus limbic system, which affects our pituitary gland, which is located right here, and it stimulates our adrenals to produce a stress hormone called cortisol. Now, once this hormone is produced, it really has a downstream effect on our immune cells in the gut. It makes increased cortisol leads to increased gut permeability, which causes a leaky gut, and which is pro-inflammatory. So all of these effects of stress indirectly leading to higher cortisol production can affect our gut microbiome. It can down-regulate the glucocorticoid receptors and make a higher production of pro-inflammatory cytokines that circulate, like TNF, interferons, and IL-6, and can cause malabsorption, diarrheas, vitamin deficiencies, and such like things. So it is highly important to understand how they are linked, the gut microbiome and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, because a lot of times I'm asked, like, why is it that identical twins can have different microbiome? Because of all these factors that can have indirect effects as well. So now, like I promised, initially I'll talk about C. diff. C. diff is Clostridium difficile, Clostridioides difficile, which is a bacteria that is the most important cause of nosocomial diarrhea. It is basically in normal people, there is colonization resistance. Even if we are exposed to the spores of this bacteria, we don't get infected by it. But if a patient has a faulty microbiome, so this is a normal microbiota, which is very diverse. But if for some reason patients they lose this colonization resistance because of exposure to antibiotics, which is the biggest risk factor for dysbiosis, or other factors like their diet is not good, or they are older patients who cannot mount up an immune response, or most recently they've had COVID infection and their immunity is much less. So they undergo dysbiosis, and they are more susceptible to C. diff. And when they are exposed to C. diff, these spores in these patients with a dysbiotic gut will germinate into vegetative C. diff forms, and which produces toxins in the intestinal tracts and causes diarrhea. And then these patients are never able to, some of them are never able to go back to this normal microbiota stage, because they are exposed to more repeated insults of the microbiome, and they enter into this vicious cycle of recurrent C. diff. And this has become a big challenge for us infectious disease physicians and gastroenterologists to treat, because we are never able to restore their microbiome. So that's why we have now, in these patients, we are using a newer set of drugs, and we are doing fecal transplants. You must have heard of fecal transplants. We are taking the normal stools with normal microbiome from normal patients and transplanting it to patients who have a dysbiotic gut and who have entered into this cycle of recurrent C. diff. These patients are suffering from diarrhea, incessant diarrhea. And so we are restoring their microbiome by doing fecal transplants. Or most recently, live biotherapeutic products, which are drugs that have that are purified, that are created by using stool and using healthy purified bacteria from normal stools. And they are purified in the lab, and they are called live biotherapeutic products. So they are basically good bacteria that are instilled into patients' colon. Either they are done through enemas, rectal enemas, or they are now capsules of live biotherapeutic products that we are giving to our patients. But why do we need to come to this stage? Why can't we go the route of creating a healthy, diverse microbiome through our diet and through our lifestyle modifications? So that is where we want to be. So I also want to share this study with you. So I did this study with my team at my hospital in Detroit. We took 45 patients, and 10 of these patients actually had C. diff. 10 of them were normal, no infections, and 10 had COVID. They were all older patients, and we did collect their stools, and we did 16S RNA gene sequencing on their stools. And we wanted to compare, look at their microbiome. And we wanted to see how diverse. There is an index called Shannon Diversity Index that can tell how diverse the microbiome of the stool is. So what we found was that patients who had multiple infections with multi-drug resistant organisms, which are MDROs, and patients who were obese, more than 80 kgs, or they were not obese but exposed to antibiotics, had a significantly decreased microbial richness. So we measured richness by a Chow richness index, and we measured diversity. So we measured both. So what we found was that both giving antibiotics to our patients and patients who are colonized with multi-drug resistant organisms decrease their diversity. Of course, the richness is dependent on whether they were obese or not. So this was an interesting study that we did. And this is, you can see a graph where you can see patients who got no antibiotics in green, and patients in orange got antibiotics. So the green ones without antibiotic exposures had a much higher diversity index. It's called the Shannon Diversity Index. And the ones with antibiotics had a lower diversity index. Same way, you can see over here, these patients over here in this graph were negative for any organisms, no infections. So their diversity was much higher than those which had infections. So again, no infections, their richness was much higher than the others. and those who got exposed to antibiotics were less diverse as compared to others. So this was an interesting study that we were able to do on these 45 patients at our hospital. So what determines our microbiome? Lots of factors, and there is a lot of research going on, and there's a lot of unknowns, but a lot that we know about. Of course, you know, Dr. Gupta mentioned diet and supplements is huge. The more colors you have on your plate, the better, the more diversity. You know, you are eating healthy legumes and beans and vegetables and fruits, trying to add more diversity in your diet, you will get a good, healthy microbiome. Lifestyle changes like exercise. So avoiding antibiotics when you have a viral infection, you know, saying no to your pediatrician as students, when you know it's a viral infection, then you don't need antibiotics. They can really have a long-term effect on your microbiome. Of course, environment is huge. And then, of course, genetics, you know, we cannot alter the genetics, but we can introduce other lifestyle modifications in our diet, avoiding a lot of animal protein, and using plant-based diet is huge. Of course, so what are the ways that we can improve our microbiome? I talked a little bit about diverse range of foods like legumes, beans, fruits. They have a lot of fiber. We need more fiber that can promote growth of healthy bifidobacterium, more fermented foods. Like this is huge, you know, adding, because they will have those healthy bacteria, yogurt and sauerkraut and kefir. They have a lot of lactobacilli and others. Limit your intake of artificial sweeteners, for example, like aspartame. That can also promote growth of unhealthy bacteria like Enterobacteriaceae in the gut microbiome. Eat prebiotic foods like bananas, asparagus, oats, and apples. You know, when you are a mom, for example, you want to breastfeed for your child for at least 6 months. Again, it's very important for development of good gut microbiome. Children who are breastfed for 6 months have more bifidobacterium. Eating whole grains, plant-based diet, talked about avoiding antibiotics when not needed, like in a viral infection. You know, the other question I'm asked a lot is, how about taking probiotics? So I would not recommend that, going over the counter, going to a pharmacy and taking probiotics. I would not recommend that, because there is a lot of data that orally taking probiotics without a prescription and on your own can actually lead to more harm, because you don't know what kind of bacteria are there in those probiotics. So I am going to end here, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Dr. Chopra, for such an amazing presentation about microbiome. So Dr. Chopra, how do the medications like antibiotics and pain medications like ibuprofen, etc., impact our microbiome?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Antibiotics can alter our microbiome. They destroy the healthy bacteria that we have in our gut, and they make it more susceptible to colonization by bacteria like C. diff, which can cause diarrhea. It's easier for bacteria like C. diff to colonize our gut if we don't we are not in a state of eubiosis. It's easier for C. diff to germinate in our gut and produce toxins, because that resistance, that barrier is broken when we are exposed to antibiotics. Ibuprofen I don't know of studies that are particularly focused on ibuprofen and gut microbiome, but I know that chemotherapeutic drugs and steroids, for example, can also affect the gut microbiome in a negative way.
Thank you.
Go ahead, I see we have another question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teena Chopra, about your presentation. As a mom, I am from Brazil, and we have been living here for 13 years, and one of things that caught my attention here in the United States about the culture is about the breastfeeding. We learn, I think your data shows a lot about that the breastfeeding increase the immune system of the children, and they have a lower risk of infections that can lead also to the need of a use of antibiotics that reduce this flora, right? And also about the bone formation. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think it's something prophylactic that the doctors, especially the ones who work with the moms, new moms, that they don't know what to do. Should I breastfeed my child? Should I not? How to find this balance when they are still young? When they grow up, we can change. We cannot choose their habits of like a food, but as a mom, your talk touched me a lot, and I can see that in my real life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I totally agree with you. I think that in European countries and other countries, there is a lot of stress on breastfeeding, but now movement has passed to the US as well. And if you go to US hospitals now, there is always a feeding specialist who will see the mom right away within the first few hours of giving birth and make sure she knows how to breastfeed and make sure she's comfortable and the baby is latching before they are discharged from the hospitals. So, it's all because of the fact, like you mentioned, the bonding, the temperature regulation in the child, regulation of immunity and developing that healthy gut microbiome. Also, breastfed babies are known not to be obese as compared to non-breastfed bottle-fed babies. So there is a lot of data around that. And of course, gut microbiome and susceptibility from infections, not only in childhood, but also later on in life. Development of allergies, are less common in patients, children who are breastfed as compared to bottle-fed. But I totally agree with you, and your comment is spot on the fact that prevention is so important, and this is a lifestyle as well that we choose. Yeah.
Go ahead, Junie, and then Louise.
Okay, thank you. So my question was, since the fecal transplant is basically cutting edge, is there a way that it can work for immune compromised people?
Yes. So, Ajuni, I actually have done 60 fecal transplants on my patients, but I used to do them before the pandemic, not anymore, because now we have better products available. And I've of those 60 transplants that I've done, 40 of them were actually in immunocompromised patients, because it is harder for an immunocompromised patient to recover their gut microbiome. It's harder for them to go into a eubiotic state. So they remain in a dysbiotic state much longer. If you and I with healthy immune systems, if we were exposed to C. diff, let's say we got an infection, we will go back to a eubiotic state after some time, even though we were exposed to antibiotics, because our gut would recover itself. But a cancer patient with immunocompromised due to any reason, being on steroids, for them to recover their microbiome is much harder, and they are the ones who remain in that vicious cycle of recurrent C. diff. And the only treatment for recurrent C. diff is you transplant and take a healthy stool sample from a healthy donor and you transplant it so that they can have that healthy, good bacteria. But nowadays, because there were so many cases of fecal transplant induced infections in patients, so there's a lot of concern for that. So we are actually doing FDA approved. There's an FDA approved fecal transplant product, which is purified good bacteria, which are called live biotherapeutic products. And they are also transplanted through the rectal area but they are much safer. So those are the kinds of things that we are doing now on our patients.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Louise.
So I had a question, Dr. Chopra, about how you were talking about over-the-counter like probiotics. Like this has become like a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So like how, as young people, what can we do to get our like daily like prebiotics and probiotics?
So again, the important thing that you can do is your diet. You can include fermented foods, which are prebiotic foods in your diet. For example, yogurt. Yogurt is a great way of getting prebiotics. Kefir is a great way of getting prebiotics, and smoothies and things like kimchi and things like sourdough bread, for example, whole grain sourdough bread, kimchi, sauerkraut, all of these are fermented foods and they have a lot of prebiotics in them and they are great for your diet. Pickled vegetables are great, pickled onions, pickled anything pickled. I was doing this presentation a few weeks ago and somebody asked me, can we eat pickled grapes? I said, yes, absolutely. You can have pickled grapes. So there's a lot you can do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have one more question. Go ahead.
Hi, can I ask? My name is
Mhm.
Sakti. Hi. Hi, doctor. So this is the thing, like, normally when we go to wellness checkup and all those stuff, to keep our gut and intestine, all those stuff healthy, the pediatrics and even the regular doctors say, hey, you need to have, you should not be constipated. This is what is in India. And we need to poop every day. But in United States, when you go to pediatrics or adult doctors, they said, yeah, it's okay. Even alternate day is okay. That is one thing. And so it's so confusing when we say to the kids at home, saying like, yeah, on one side you are saying like we need to go every day at home. That's our user education. But at the same time, they say like, hey, we need to trust the doctor. And the doctor says, yeah, it's every day that it is okay. So one is, how do we handle this?
Yeah.
I mean, how do
No,
we say
that
the doctor is not right in the situation, and like and then they say like, I lost trust on your parents because the doctor is always right.
Yeah, no, you are both the things are right. So to give you an example, everybody, what doctors, GI doctors, gastroenterologists, and others, they'll tell you, pediatricians, that children are developing. This is mostly, you will see that by pediatricians telling you this. Children are developing bowel habits. It for them to become regular, it'll take time. So even if they are pooping every other day, that's fine. You don't want to force them. You don't want to affect their mental health by forcing them to go every single day if they can't. Having said that, you want to develop good habits through diet, and once they develop a frequency which is a daily rather than alternate or 2 days later, then their body will become used to. So you are also right when you said that we should poop every day, and you are also right when the pediatrician told you that it's okay if they are going every other day, because you are trying to develop that good habit slowly and steadily. You don't want to force them, because remember, bowel movements are a parasympathetic function. You cannot have a bowel movement if you have a lot of stress. So you want to introduce this good habit very slowly in your child.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chopra, for this amazing presentation. I think this really opens our eyes to another world, and the microbiome is so fascinating, so much new research being done, and it's just mind-blowing to think that we're more bacteria than human.
Thank you, Meher, and your team. I think you guys have done an awesome job, and I am so impressed by this work that you guys have done as a team. And thank you. It's my honor to be here.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. That concludes our 2023 Youth Global Health and Innovation Conference. It was truly an action-packed day full of so much fun and so much learning. I know I learned so much from all of our amazing speakers today, and I'll put the link in the chat to our Worth a Shot website and some of the work that we do, and also to our Youth Global Health and Innovation website. So you can see our past recordings of past sessions that we've had. And so the recording, we will send this out to you as soon as we have it uploaded. So we're so glad that you all could join us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.